Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever just looked at a simple letter, like P, something you see, I don't know, hundreds of times a day, and actually pause to wonder why that shape?
Right, why the line in the loop?
Exactly. Why a vertical line with that little bubble on top, and why does it make that specific sound, that quick p?
It feels so fundamental, doesn't it? Almost invisible because it's just, well, it's everywhere.
Totally.
We rarely stop to question the building blocks of our language.
But what if the shape and the sound of a letter weren't random at all? What if they were deeply rooted in something physical, like a primal human action, maybe something seen in nature?
That's exactly where this deep dive is heading. We've been looking at some really fascinating material
Yeah.
that explores the natural origins of letter forms. And it does it through the lens of a theory called Odam.
Odam Tilly. Okay.
Yeah, and this theory, well, as it's presented in the material we're using, it sees letters not just as abstract symbols.
Okay, not just random marks.
No, not at all. It sees them more as reflections of the natural world or fundamental actions, even human instinct.
Wow.
It proposes this pretty profound connection between the shapes we write, the sounds we make, and our earliest experiences.
So for this deep dive then, our mission, we're going to use this perspective, this Odam Tilly idea, to look specifically at the letter P.
That's the plan. How its visual shape, its sound, and even its core symbolic meaning might all tie back to one particular, very primal act.
And you mentioned wood, like splitting wood.
Exactly. You might be surprised. It involves chopping wood with an axe.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How are we going to break this down?
So we'll walk through the connections just as they're laid out in this theory.
Yeah.
First, the visual link, how the action looks like a P.
Right.
Then the auditory side, the sound it makes.
The P.
Yes. And finally, the symbolic layer, what that whole action represents.
All right. Get ready, you listening out there, because this everyday letter might suddenly seem a lot more interesting.
So, okay, the core premise here. It's that letters aren't just arbitrary inventions.
Not random.
No. This Odam Tilly theory suggests they mirror things like natural phenomena, actions, instinctual human responses.
And P, specifically.
When it comes to the letter P, this framework points to its origin in that primal act of splitting something apart.
Okay.
And it draws a very specific analogy.
Yeah.
Chopping wood with an axe.
Right, the wood chopping. So visually, how does chopping wood look like the letter P? That seems like a stretch at first glance.
Well, the idea asks you to imagine watching the act from a specific angle.
Okay.
Looking down from above, right as someone is splitting a log.
Ah, top-down view. Got it.
That's right. From that perspective, at that critical moment,
Yeah.
when the axe head goes into the log and starts to split it,
Yeah.
you can see something that looks quite a bit like the letter P forming.
How so?
Well, think about the handle of the axe. It's pointing straight down, right?
Okay, yeah, straight line.
That aligns pretty well with the vertical stroke of the lowercase p.
I can picture the straight upright line of the handle. Makes sense.
Exactly. And then, as the log starts to split, the two halves begin to separate.
Right.
Now, if you focus on just one side of that split log, you see the rounded sort of half-circle shape of the wood itself.
Ah, okay. The curve of the log.
Yes, that curved form attached to the straight line of the handle that creates the rounded upper part of the P.
So the handle is the straight part, and the swelling rounded shape of the wood as it splits on one side that forms the bubble.
Precisely. The theory really highlights that this P-like structure is most clear right at that moment the log is being pierced and pulled apart.
Interesting.
And there's also the space opening up between the two halves. That itself represents the tension and the result of the action division.
Huh. That's kind of fascinating to think about a common letter shape potentially capturing a snapshot, like a freeze frame, of a fundamental physical interaction.
Yeah, interacting with the world.
But it's not just about the shape, though.
Yeah. This theory also links the letter P to the sound associated with this action.
Right, the chopping sound.
Think about that sharp, almost explosive sound a heavy axe makes when it hits wood and cracks it open.
Yeah, it's a distinct sound, a quick burst.
The description in the material we looked at actually mentions sounds like peers or per or even pop.
Puh. Pop, yeah, I can hear that.
And this connects directly to the phonetic nature of the letter P itself.
How so, phonetically?
Phonetically, P is what linguists call a voiceless bilabial plosive.
Okay. Big words, simply put.
Simply put, you press your lips together, build up air behind them, and then release it suddenly.
Puh. Got it.
Exactly. That sudden release of air, that quick burst, It's seen as mirroring the bursting energy or maybe the pressure building up in the wood right before it gives way.
The tension releasing in the sound.
Yes, culminating in that sharp sound of the split.
And does this idea find support, like in actual words?
It seems so. The theory points to examples in different languages where the P sound shows up in words connected to sudden force or breaking or rupture.
Okay, like what?
Well, think about English words. You got pop, push, press, pierce.
Yeah. They all have that P sound and relate to applying force or breaking through something.
Exactly. And other languages seem to show similar patterns. In French, péter means to burst.
Okay.
In Russian, proskat apparently means to crack. The sound itself seems inherently tied to this idea of sudden impact and breaking.
So the sound isn't just arbitrary either. It could be seen as an echo, almost, of the splitting action itself.
That's the argument. And this is where it gets, I think, even more interesting.
Go on.
This visual origin and this auditory origin, they then lead to a symbolic meaning for the letter P within this Odam framework.
Okay, symbolism. So because P is linked to splitting or chopping.
Right. It carries an association with breaking things apart, breaking unity.
Creating division,
Yeah.
separation.
Exactly. It's seen as representing the initiation of division or the release of built-up pressure. And it's often associated, symbolically, with negative transitions like moving from a state of unity or wholeness towards separation.
Interesting. Does the theory contrast it with other letters?
It does. It contrasts P with letters like, say, O, which might symbolize unity or wholeness.
Like a circle.
Right. Or maybe M, which could represent connection or continuity. P is the opposite. It's about the break.
So what's the formal definition then, according to this Odam idea?
The definition presented for P in the material is quite specific. It said something like a symbolic shape of destruction of unity.
Destruction of unity, okay.
Where pressure builds and finally breaks a whole into separate parts. It's the form of departure from harmony and the creation of duality.
Departure from harmony, creation of duality. That's quite a heavy meaning for a simple letter.
It is. And this prompts us to look at words containing P again. Does this symbolic meaning actually resonate in how we use them?
Right. Does it hold up?
Well, the material we examine provides several examples that seem to support this idea.
Okay, let's hear some English examples.
Sure. Think about pain.
Pain. Yeah, that's definitely about the breaking of comfort or well-being, no doubt.
Or problem. A problem represents a kind of broken solution, maybe, or a disrupted balance.
True. What else?
Part. Simple word, but it means separation from a larger whole.
Obvious, yeah.
Punish. That's a negative consequence. Definitely a break from normalcy or acceptance.
Right.
Poverty. A lack of wholeness, right. A state of deprivation, a break from abundance. And even pollute. Destroying natural purity. Breaking down an intact, healthy state.
Wow. That's quite a list. It's striking how many of those words carry that sense of something being broken or lost or separated or pressured negatively.
And similar patterns apparently emerge in other languages too, according to this framework.
Like the French examples.
Yeah, the source mentioned French words like perdre, to lose, perdre, fear,
Yeah.
pénurie, shortage, and punir, to punish.
Fear, shortage, loss, punishment. It all fits that negative breaking pattern.
It seems to reinforce the idea, doesn't it?
It really does. So, okay, let's try and bring this all together based on the material we've explored.
Right. The conclusion presented is that the letter P isn't just some random squiggle in sound that we happen to create.
Not arbitrary.
No. Instead, its shape is presented as emerging from a really fundamental, observable, natural scene, that act of splitting wood.
The axe, the log, the split.
Its sound is seen as mimicking the sudden burst heard during that act. And its meaning, its symbolism, reflects the consequence. Separation, pressure, division, often with negative connotations.
So this whole approach, this Odam theory, it suggests a deeper layer to our language.
That's the idea. It connects shape, sound, and meaning into what the source material describes as a coherent picture of natural intelligence.
A natural intelligence. Wow.
And it talks about potentially restoring meaning through something called symbolic memory.
Symbolic memory. Like these shapes and sounds hold echoes of ancient experiences.
That's kind of the implication. It hints that language itself, in its most basic forms, might be a kind of mirror of nature.
A mirror reflecting fundamental actions and their outcomes. Things humans have seen and understood forever.
Pretty much since the beginning, yeah.
Wow. Okay, so the next time you, listening right now, happen to see the letter P, or maybe make that distinct P sound,
Yeah.
maybe take a moment. Think about an axe hitting wood.
Hmm.
The Odam theory, based on the material we just dove into, puts forth this really compelling idea
Uh-huh.
that this seemingly simple letter could be profoundly rooted in that physical act of splitting. It links its visual form, its sound, and its core meaning to concepts of separation and pressure.
And maybe consider how that potential natural origin resonates or doesn't with some of the words we discussed that use the letter P.
Yeah, does it feel right for words like pain or part or push?
Something to think about.
Definitely. And building on the really fascinating idea, language as a mirror of nature and symbolic memory. Here's something maybe to ponder long after this deep dive is over.
Okay.
If the origins of something as basic as the letter P can be traced back, potentially, to a physical action and its consequence, splitting and separation, what other hidden connections might lie within the very structure of the letters we use every single day?
Good question.
What other secrets might language hold about our shared human experience, our history, and the natural world around us?